you are here today for the Tribal Child Welfare Data System Procurement webinar series. Today is part 2 of our 3-part series, and we'll be talking about procuring a Tribal Child Welfare Data System. I'll go over a little bit of housekeeping in a second, including just a reminder that this is a recorded webinar, and let you meet our team. We'll go through a couple poll questions, and the bulk of our conversation today will be with Summer and Kimberly, talking about procuring a tribal child welfare data system. So we'll go over what budgeting looks like and how you might find the right data system for your program. As I get started, a couple pieces of housekeeping. There's a worksheet available for your reference. I'm just going to put in the chat a copy of the slides, the worksheet, and the worksheet is in both PDF and Word doc versions. We heard from folks in our feedback webinar that it would be helpful to have this in a couple different formats. And so in trying to be responsive, we want to make sure that the tools we have are helpful to you. So thanks, A, for the feedback. And B, we hope that you use this worksheet today during the webinar to take notes or to bring back to your team to have deeper dialogue about procuring a data system. This is a Zoom webinar, so all of our participants, as you join today, you are automatically muted. If you have a question, there's a couple ways that we can answer that for you. On your screen, you'll see a little Q&A box. You can click on that and ask a question at any time. That will prompt us, and hopefully one of us will see it. And we have a couple of folks helping from our team, Esther Ann and Melissa McGee, who they'll be moderating our chat today, as well as checking out our Q&A if anything pops up in there. You can also get our attention. There's a little raised hand feature. If you'd like to say something verbally, we can do that. That is absolutely an option. We want this to be interactive, and we want you to be able to ask questions as you can. As a final reminder, this webinar is being recorded today. It will be available on the Capacity Building Center for Tribes YouTube channel. I recommend subscribing to get notifications about our future webinars, and it will also be on the Tribal Information Exchange. We'll send a copy out to everybody afterwards. And I mentioned questions already, so I am going to jump right into meeting our team. And so we have with us Kimberly Kitchener from the Comanche Indian Tribe and Summer Purdom from the Capacity Building Center for Tribes. And we'll largely be talking with Kimberly and Summer today about their experiences in procuring a data system for their previous and current programs. We've also have Cheryl Montoya with us today. Cheryl is with the Capacity Building Center for Tribes. She is on the call to respond to and answer questions for us. And then we also are joined by Lisa Leonard from the Children's Bureau Division of State Systems. In supporting us putting together this webinar, David Baker and Marnie Evans also helped out. They're not here today, but just want to give them a shout out. All right, we have a couple poll questions that we would like to ask our audience. And so I'm going to launch that really quick. And we want to ask folks, you should see on your screen, what is your role in tribal child welfare? This helps us understand who's in the room, as well as you understand as well. And we'll share those results in 1 second. Wonderful. We'll give about 10 more seconds for folks to respond. All right, let me share those results really quick. So it looks like we have a bulk of people who fit in the other category today. So if you have not already, it'd be helpful if you could share in the chat where you're joining us from so we can get a sense of who's with us today for the conversation. We also have a number of folks offering state and federal support and a couple directors, administrators, and case managers. All right, and then we have another poll question. And our first question is, have you participated in purchasing a data system before? And you'll see a second question. Did you watch part 1 of this webinar series? There's no right or wrong answer. It's okay if you haven't. We just want to know if folks are coming in with that background knowledge from part one, or if we have folks who have not seen it and are joining us for the first time. And we'll give that about 5 more seconds if you've not responded. All right, so the majority of folks on our call, about 80%, have not participated in purchasing a data system before. So we look forward to chatting with you all about that today. And then it looks like the majority of folks did join us for part one. So if you have not, that link is in the chat and we encourage you to check it out. Okay, 2 more questions before we get started. Our next one, we'd like you to put in the chat, what are some challenges that you anticipate when purchasing a new data system? And we'll give folks a second to think about that and write something. All right, I see one coming in already funding, vendor with expertise. Not really knowing all the data you really need to be collecting. Great point. Anything else? Some challenges that you might anticipate as you purchase a new data system. Knowing what data systems are available, that's huge. Definitely something we'll talk about. And along the same lines, a number of providers and their familiarity with tribal child welfare in particular is huge. Writing a good RFP, big one. Great, all things that we are going to be covering today or in our part 3 of this webinar series as well. So as we are wrapping that up, if you have more challenges, please feel free to share those. But another piece of this is, what is the most exciting thing about getting a new data system? What makes you and your team excited about even considering the large amount of work that goes into finding and setting up your data system? Information access, yeah. Not having huge paper files, yeah, absolutely. Easy and quick access to info, visibility of trends and performance in the program. Hi, Betty, thank you for joining us. All right, great. And we'll give folks a minute. Feel free to continue entering either challenges or things that get you excited about a data system in the chat. Organization, I see, is another one. And, oh, we have one last question. What benefits and outcomes do you want to see from a new data system? So this could be similar to things that get you excited, but what are some outcomes for your program, for the children in your program, for the families that you might want to see come out of purchasing or procuring a new data system? I see reporting collection as one of them. Connections to services, possibly being able to make referrals quicker or to track referrals. Being able to measure the length of a stay, so having that data really right at your fingertips, maybe even being automatically calculated for you. Not duplicating a service, to have one system of care, that's huge. Reports, needs, grant info accessible, services and compliance, active efforts. Yeah, being able to track all of those pieces, being able to have reporting that is easy, that's accurate, that's timely. Great. Family-centric and family design metrics. Absolutely. Yeah, so thinking how can we tie our outcomes to what is needed most um, to impact families? Connecting that data is what I'm trying to say. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. So we're going to jump into our conversation. And so I have a first question, and Summer and Kimberly, if you could both sort of introduce yourself as well as we go into this first question. But I'd like to ask you both, and I encourage whoever wants to go first. How do you plan for your budget for a data system? And I'll kind of let one of you just start, and then we'll go into the questions.
So I can start. As Sarah said, my name is Kimberly Kirchner, and I'm with the Knights Indian Tribe in Alaska. I am the Naini Child Welfare Coordinator. So I am behind the scenes, and I work intimately with our data system. I've been here for almost 4 years, and I have very minimal cases, but I do work very closely with our caseworkers. So in terms of planning for a budget, it's always a good place to start is to know what your tribe requires. So some tribes, very large, Kenichi has multiple policies on procurement and how it goes about, who has to approve. Um, Understanding those policies and how it goes will help you understand how long of a process this might be. A smaller tribe, maybe it's just a request to your tribal council or your tribal board, whatever governing body you have. But the best thing to do is, start with that, and knowing what resources that you have available. And how do you determine those? Well, you're going to have to get really creative, as it says. And how do you do that? Well, there's a lot of different ways in which you can get creative. The first thing is know that for those tribes who are looking to get 4E approval or have 4E approval, the 4E planning process does allow you to ask for some reimbursement of those expenses. So that's one thing. The other thing is, maybe you have tribal funds that you can use specifically for that. There might be foundations in your area. There might be BIA funding, kind of where you go to your normal funding places and find out what they can do for you. That might also mean thinking about how you implement, and I know we're not anywhere near implementing a data system. However, if you have multiple satellites or multiple modules that you intend to do to bring on, maybe you bring on one and then a second one a little bit later and a third one. So I think those things are definitely important as you start to plan your budget. I don't know, Summer, if you have other things that you wanted to add to that.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Summer Purdom. I'm with the Capacity Building Center for Tribes. And I was part of the team that helped develop and implement Direct Title 4E for Cherokee Nation. And Kimberly made some really good points. Some of the other things that I would like to touch on and just add to that is having a solid idea of what you want your data management system to do for you. What are the capabilities that you want it to have? And don't be afraid to develop a plan for the data management system, the budget and everything, and talk to your tribal council. Once you establish the different funding streams that are available within your tribe, a lot of times you can talk to council and see what other resources and funding streams are available within the tribe, not necessarily in your child welfare department, but within the tribe. And there have been tribes that tribal council has allotted certain amount of general funds towards, matching the cost of data management system. So when we say get creative, that's one of those ways that you can get creative, and forward thinking with your data management system. Think about the growth of your department, where you want it to go, what you want it to look like, and a data management system that will accommodate that growth. And also be thinking of the the individual things that may come later. Once you get your data management system, are you going to have individual licenses for everyone that operates within your system? So calculating that into your budget. And I think the only other thing that I wanted to go into was making sure that you know, like within your entirety of your tribal nation, what other departments may benefit from the use of your data management system as well. If you find a data management system that can be used across different programs and different departments, maybe those costs can be split amongst those departments instead of having that entirety of the cost on your child welfare department.
And so that's a good thing. Kind of going back to the first session that we had, we talked about that planning group, that core team that you're going to put together. That definitely needs to include some finance folks and some administrative folks to ensure that you're covering all of your bases. Because as Summer said, and I think someone mentioned in the chat as well, we want something that covers not only child welfare, but social services. So at Kenize, our database covers social services, child welfare, our tribal court, enrollment, and I think there's one other department. So we have these different satellites or modules. And some are very sophisticated, others not so much. We need to do some work with those yet. Also thinking about those costs that go into a data management system. For example, obviously you have the implementation cost. Are you buying the software? Are you just licensing? Is it going to be on your server? Is it in the cloud? All of those kinds of things. But also those indirect costs, which I know, for instance, when I've put budgets together, I don't always give a lot of thought to. So for example, honestly, you could probably put a whole FTE of a staff person from your department and allocate that time to the data system, particularly if you have never used a data system before. So there's going to be a lot of training. You have to try out other databases and figure out where you're going. Also, your IT staff. How much IT staff are you going to have? For us, initially, we had almost a full-time FTE IT staff person working on this data system because there was so much. Luckily, I had implemented a data system prior to this, so I had a little bit more knowledge about how you map things and how things go, but that may not be the case for your staff. And so to think about those kinds of things. And you can also, ask other tribes specifically, like a tribe that's about your size, like what did you all put into it? Or what are you putting into it? Do you have licenses and how all that works? Because that will definitely make a difference in what your budget really looks like. So the one thing that I think people tend to underestimate is the actual time of staff. So I recommend overestimating that over a longer period of time. Because as much as you think like we can do this in 6 months and the vendor's saying, oh, for sure, 6 months, that's great. It's not going to happen in 6 months. Just be realistic. It's just not going to happen. And then obviously starting the budgeting process early so that you kind of have an idea of what it is that you have and what it is that you need. So for example, if you're going to look at vendors, there aren't a lot of vendors to start with, but you could have a vendor who is going to charge you, $500,000. You could have a vendor who says, look, I will create a system just for you, and that could cost $1 million. Is that way out of the ballpark for your tribe? Maybe not. So those are things that you kind of need to figure out as you go along to make sure that you're including everything in your planning stage, because the more planning you do, the easier the implementation will be.
Kimberly, I wanted to ask one follow-up question, and Summer, feel free to chime in as well. So in terms of costs, what does year one or the first part of implementation look like in comparison to maybe the ongoing costs, or what should folks consider when they're looking at maintenance?
Okay, so maintenance, definitely the ongoing support that you're going to need. So for example, updates, if you have, if you are a 4E agency and AFGARS makes a change, there's a change to the reporting requirements for AFGARS. How much is that going to cost? When you have new staff on board and you need training, or is the vendor providing it? What does that cost look like? Other things, who's hosting it? Again, are you hosting it? Are they hosting it? Licenses. Right now, we've implemented OneTribe. We've implemented our data system. I believe it started in January of 2022. And we're almost out of licenses, because we're expanding as we go along. So you might want to think about how your department or departments are going to be expanding in the future. You may have staff who have left, and you may have open positions. Are they really going to get filled? Are they not going to get filled? Because obviously you don't want to buy 100 licenses if you're only going to use 10. Those kinds of things. I don't know, Summer, if you can think of anything else that would be part of those ongoing costs.
I think the only thing I'd want to hit on is just that there's a portion of your ongoing maintenance costs for your data management system that you can ask for reimbursement for. So those are things that you need to consider as well. Whereas, that year one may be the actual purchase and the large portion of the funding going towards purchasing your data management system. In those subsequent years, there's that possibility of possible reimbursement for data system management maintenance. So keeping that in mind as well when you're planning your budget.
Great, thank you. So I know we didn't go directly into each one of these questions. I'm wondering if either of you has anything else about this kind of part one before we dive into part two, or if there's any questions from our audience about this specific area for planning for your budget. All right, we'll give folks a couple minutes. Feel free to ask your questions if you have them, and we are going to dive right in sort of to our part two of this conversation. So after thinking of your budget and starting to get that work going, we also need to simultaneously be thinking about finding the correct data system to meet a program's needs. And so I want to open this question largely to both Kimberly and Summer. So how do you find the right data system to meet your program's needs?
Well, I would start with some of the comments that were in the chat earlier, like some of the things that you want benefits or outcomes, some of the things that you see as challenges. So for example, there were a couple of people who said it would be great if I'm in court or I'm on site with a visit or doing things outside of the office, that I would have access to that data. If that's important, that is something that not every tribe and their IT departments or vendor has available. So for example, at Kenaitze, we don't have that availability. So unless we're connected to our network, we don't have access to that. So if I'm in state court and I'm taking notes or I'm looking for a document, I'm not going to have access to that data system. So that's a big one, definitely. Are you going to be a Title IV agency? That means AFGARS, the adoption and foster care something reports.
Analysis.
Analysis, thank you. If you haven't heard of AFGARS before and you are going to be a Title IV agency, it will become your new best friend. If you're going to be a Title IV agency, you need to be able to report on AFGARS. So you want to become familiar with what those requirements are. Other people were saying, oh, I want to be able to have metrics for supervision purposes, for building our program purposes. What does that look like? If you have reports that you already need, a grant report for the state or for another funder, what does that look like? Have those reports in hand and know what those data needs are. Ask your supervisors what would be helpful to have in terms of information about the people that you're supervising. So they don't have to go into each individual case and see, oh, what did Kimberly do on this case last? Or what did Summer do on this case last? So I think that's very important. Summer, do you have things to add to that?
I think I just wanted to, like you went into detail, if you're deciding to be a tribal 4E agency, there are certain AFCAR's information and data that is important that your system provide for you. But even if you go the different route, even if you go through everything through your tribal state agreement or pass through, be thinking of what the state needs of you that you can possibly incorporate into your data management system to make your life easier within the program that you're in. And I think too, just really, to me, this was your visionary phase. This was your think of everything, all of the things that you would want a data manager, your wish list of what you would want a data management system to do for you, and make that list and have it so that when you're looking around, you're going to get an idea of what data management systems. Like Kimberly said, there's not a whole bunch out there, but you're going to get a really good idea of what they can and can't do. And so go to the table with everything you want. And then once you get to the table and you're like, oh, well, we like this data management system, but it doesn't do this, then decide amongst yourselves, negotiate amongst yourselves on how important that really is. And if that's something that you're willing to give up, or look further into a different data management system that might provide that need for you. So I always say when you're planning for, trying to find the right one, like be the biggest visionary that you can think of. Think of everything, the reports that you would like that you have to do to tribal council, the reports that the direct staff have to do every month to give to their supervisor or manager, the reports that the supervisor or manager has to do to give to the executive director, and however your program is set up, all of those reports that would save time if your data management system pulled them for you. And then forms, know the difference. You can have this option of all these reports that can be ran, but also does your data management system, can it develop forms for you? Can you input information and print your case plan, or any of the other forms that you would have, your placement paperwork for your foster parent? Can you input all of that data into your data management system and then print it, and when you're looking ahead, looking at those data management systems that you can access offsite, when you're resource workers are out at the home, trying to get the information from the foster parent, can they fill it out on an iPad and it all come back to the original data management system, and the foster parent can sign everything right there and save a trip into the office, all of the capabilities, what can be uploaded and saved within your system. And so I always stress that this is that visionary, that think big, think of everything possible that you would want a data management system to do, and put that on your list. And like Kimberly said, reach out to your peers and other tribal agencies that have either developed their own, or have bought a data management system, or are currently working in a data management system, and have those questions ready. What does it do for you? What are some things you wish it would do for you? What are its capabilities? What are its flaws? What are some things that you wish you had known before purchasing this system? Because a lot of times you do get data management systems out there that can meet the needs of multiple tribal nations and how they're organized and structured, because we're all different, like we're all set up differently. But one tribe may not know how another tribe is organized, so they just know that this data management system meets their needs and how they're organized. So know what it is that, how you're organized and the needs that you would want to be met, so that you can ask those questions to your potential data management providers.
The other thing I think to think about too is, especially if you don't have a data system or one that doesn't work well for you, it's kind of hard to imagine what it is that you want one to do, right? So maybe one thing that could help is like mapping out your process from, if say you call it a report of harm, when that first incident comes in where someone says, hey, this child isn't being treated properly. What is our process? Who does it go to? What information do we need? What do we collect? What happens to it? When does it become an investigation? And take it all the way to the end to case closure, whether that be with reunification, maybe it's a customary adoption, it's a guardian, whatever could happen, sort of map all of that out. That is one thing I think that Connect C could have done better when purchasing its data system, is sort of have those things in mind. For example, the data system that we have, there's sort of two types of records that we can create: an intake or a case. Of course, we have cases. tribal court cases, state court cases, etc. We don't have a process that's called intake. So it can be confusing when staff go in and say, hey, I need to add a report of harm. Well, that's an intake. But it's not an intake because we don't use that term. That phrase does not apply to the work that we do. So is it customizable to use the language that your department uses? So for another example is Alaska has boroughs. We don't have counties. So when it calls for a county, that's helpful for the lower 48, with the exception of Louisiana that has parishes. But for Alaska, the county is really the borough. And sometimes that might be something that you say, we can live with that. That's something we can live with. Everybody kind of understands the general terminology. But there might be other things that you cannot live with. We use the word onina for our clients and parents and children, et cetera. Can that be used in our system? Because that's something that's important to our tribe. So those are things definitely to think about. The other thing are ad hoc reports. So we've talked about those definite reports that you need, for your grantor, for your tribal council, but think about the things that you may need on the spur of the moment. You know what I mean? Your education department comes to you and says, hey, how can we work together with these families that are fractured? How many kids do you have and what ages are they? That's what I mean by ad hoc reporting. Can you do those reports? Is that available to you? And how simple is it? If you're going to see someone else show you their system, whether that's a vendor or another tribe, have them show you how easy it is to do an ad hoc report, because that can be a very complicated part of your data system. That's one other thing. Oh, and then of course, you can also think about having a vendor create a system for you, sort of a customized system. And those are great. I also believe that those are relatively expensive, but that may be what you need because it may have to serve your entire tribe, and your entire tribe is everybody's pulling together the funding for that but I would still suggest that you look at the different vendors that are out there in terms of what they offer, because there may be things that you're thinking about or not thinking about rather that you see in other vendors' options. Can you open up more than one window at a time? So if I'm in the middle of putting case notes in and say I did a hearing and I'm putting all my case notes in and I get a call from a different parent saying, that referral you gave me, I must have the number wrong. I didn't write it down correctly. Can you open a new window without losing your case notes to give them that phone number? In the system we have, it's not that easy to do. It's actually kind of complicated. Simple things like that you would almost assume would be super simple. Can you sort the data? Can you export the data? As Summer said, can you print it? Whether it's a PDF or a paper document, can you print the darn stuff? It doesn't do any good if it's in your system and you can't get it out. I'm trying to think what else. And again, make sure to get your staff input, the people who are actually going to be using the system. So whether it's your caseworkers, whether it's the receptionist, a technician, whoever that's going to be, make sure you get their input as well. Maybe they can view a vendor demonstration, for example, and say, hey, that would be really nice. I never thought of that. Or, why am I having to put this in 6 times? This is so silly. So I think definitely get your frontline folks in there, and also IT, because they're going to be able to answer questions about, we don't have servers that can host this database. We have to buy new servers, because that's also important for their input.
Kimberly, I just wanted to add, you brought up a very good point of the process mapping. Like that is so imperative when planning for your data management system. And what I would like to encourage people to do is get your staff involved in process mapping. Don't just be the executive director and think you're going to take it off everybody's plate and you know how everything works. Get your staff that's out there doing the work involved in that process mapping, because what you might find there are other processes that are taking place, or they have found ways within the process that we've developed to be quicker or more accurate in getting, the information inputted into your data management. I mean, there's so much out there. So involve your staff in that process mapping, and think about, like, Kimberly, another thing you said, just language. Are there portions of your data management system that you want to reflect your language, and can they do that? And those things like, the information that's pulled out, can they do things like hard stops? Can they say, like Kimberly, you were talking about, can you switch between screens if someone calls while you're doing that? Can you switch between screens? Can they do hard stops? Can they say, hey, you can't go any further until you enter this placement date right here, because that's, an AFCAR's reporting block. And when you're looking at becoming a 4E operating agency, can your data management system, or do you want your data management system to actually calculate up your payments for you so that you're not manually tracking it on a spreadsheet somewhere? Do you want it to connect to where the placement screen enters dates, and behind the scenes, have they programmed in the amount, your daily rate for your foster care stays? And will it calculate whether the child's been in the placement for 24 hours or not? And, will it calculate your first day and not your last day? All those things that become important when you're looking at, a 4E agency and being able to provide those maintenance payments to your resource parents. And I think too, another thing on that process mapping is, you have a process, you start somewhere with a case, whether it be intake or, whatever you call it within your organization. You start from a place and you end from a place. What I found in working in tribal nations is, a lot of times, if I work in the middle, if I work tribal CAPS cases, if I work, the ICWA cases, I may not know what intake looks like. I don't know all the information that they know, and I don't know the information that would go into a data management system at their level. So when you're process mapping, when intake does their process mapping, and the next step is permanency or tribal CAPS, give them access to what intake has process mapped, so that you're not getting duplicate information, so that you're not saying, oh, well, we need this information for our purposes, but yet it's already documented over here. So you're not having to, like Kimberly said, input the same data in 5 or 6 different places. So just thinking of those type of things when you're looking at what data management system will be best for you, is really just getting your staff involved and really looking at what the data management system can do for your agency.
The other thing too, with the payments, brought up a really good point, is, do you want your data management system to track those payments? And can that system work with whatever system your finance department or accounting department is working with? So for example, if I go into my data management system, can I get a report in whatever format that I can send over to my finance folks, and they can just upload it into their system and then cut the checks that we need? So whether you're 4E or not, is that possible? That would be really helpful to know whether they can even talk to each other. If they can be connected in a different way, all the better. But maybe you can at least get a report out that that can be sent over there, and vice versa. Is there a report that finance can send you that you can then compare to what you have in your system to say, yes, all the payments that we approved are accounted for in our system, we're good for that particular point. The other thing to think about too is changes. So we talk about process mapping, and you want to make sure you get all the pieces and parts in there, which is why you want to talk to your frontline staff, because they're the ones who actually do it. The other thing though is that when you're doing that process mapping, it may be like, well, I thought the caseworker did that. I thought that was the supervisor who, you know what I mean? You have a lot of finger pointing, maybe like, am I supposed to be doing that? I learned a lot about our child welfare staff and what they do when we went through this process mapping. And it was so good. We separated it between like China, ICWA, guardianship, and it went in different directions. So what happens when a report comes in that we don't, that we find there's been no abuse, nothing's been substantiated? What happens? And so there's a lot of things that may change as a result of that process mapping. Why are we asking the supervisor to send that letter? That should really be the caseworker. So your system also has to be able to change with you. So how hard is it to change things within the system? So for example, and not just, for AFCARS related reports, but, your funder says, hey, we now need to know how many households were assisted, not individuals, only individuals, but how many households, for example. How hard is that to get that information? Can you customize it? And can those customizations be in your report? And the other thing is that Summer said about those hard stops. You can't pay placement until the placement's been entered, for example. Like there's certain things that have to be done in an order. The other part of that, though, are maybe what you call notifications or ticklers or reminders that might say to you, hey, this case has been sitting here without any action for 2 months. That's not okay. And it notifies the caseworker, then maybe it notifies the supervisor. And so that something can be done. And maybe it just is that way because that's the way it is, and that's fine. But sort of those reminders or those notifications that can help people through that, because most places, caseworkers are overloaded with the number of things that they need to do. And it's helpful to have those reminders and not just a calendar reminder. Does it also have a calendar function? That would be nice. If you could stick things in there, and then when you open it up, it would say, oh, Kimberly, don't forget you have an ICWA hearing today at 3:00. Because that would be helpful as well.
Kimberly, you made me think of when you're talking about those reminders, those are so incredibly important when you're considering what data management system will work for you, because like you said, you get so busy. We have so many cases and so many families that we're working with, and we get so busy. But if you can have your data management system set up to, the last time you went to court, you entered the date of your court hearing, whether it was a dispositional hearing or a review hearing, a permanency hearing. And then you also entered when your next court hearing was scheduled. Are you going to get a reminder after that next court hearing? If no, like you said, there's been no action on a case for 2 months. If you've not updated, hey, it's 6 days past your report or your court hearing date, nothing is in here. You might check to see, oh, did I miss it? Did I forget to, or did that case get passed, for whatever reason? Because that's all data that you use for different purposes, whether it be for funding or 4E or what have you. And then, do you want your data, how do you want your data management system to intermingle, like in between your different areas of your department, and if your intake people that go out and they do the investigation and they decide that a child needs to be placed in custody, and can they pull up a list of available homes, and does that list tell them if that home is within eligibility? Are their background checks current? Are their fingerprints current? So that you don't say, oh, that looks like a great home and it has 2 kids available, let's place these 2 kids there. And then you find out later that their background checks had expired, and you can't make a 4E payment into that home. And so those type of things that just save you that heartache and headache later, just considering like, how do you want your each area of your data management system to commingle within the other areas?
So how do you, go about selecting the data system? Again, definitely see demonstrations. Absolutely. Whether you choose to have your own created or whether you're going to, buy from a vendor what they're offering, definitely do those demonstrations. What you may want to do is create a case. It could be based on something actually happening at your office, but something that you can use and tell the vendor, here's a case. Here's what normally happens. We get this report of harm in, then it gets reviewed, then it goes to the supervisor, then it, what I mean, and go through that process with them to see how it really works. And then if it doesn't do what you need it to do, can it do this? Can't it do that? Or how would that look? Or here's a sample report that we would use, can that pull this information out? That would certainly be helpful. And then you definitely want to compare the vendors or the databases. similarly, because it is hard. They're all different in a way. They're similar, but they're very different. So how do you do that? So you can maybe make a chart, for example, and look at the things that are important to you. Ad hoc reporting, is that important? Are reminders important? Reporting important? Cost, what additional features? How easy is it to customize? All those things. Like these are all our top 10 things, or what top things that we need. And then after each demonstration, you can say, you can either check the box or you can number it, give it a score. And then at the bottom, you can say, wow, this one, even though it doesn't have this one feature, really came out with the highest score. We should look more at that. And that doesn't mean then you have to make a decision. You can still go back again, maybe reach out to other tribes and say, are you using this? Ask for references from those vendors and say, who can we talk to about this? Because as Summer pointed out before, it's really helpful to find out what they like, what they don't like, and what they would change. Because again, there might be someone else who, does things differently that's not a priority for you, or vice versa. You need something and that system just can't do that for you. So I think that's when you're actually picking out that data system, and do the best that you can to get the costs, like ask the questions, like how much is a license? Well, if you have 1 to 50 licenses, it's X amount. If it's 51 to 100, it's Y amount, so that you can make better decisions about what that looks like.
Really, those are such good points, that ask the questions. Like we cannot stress that enough. Don't be afraid to say, how many scopes of work can I submit in a year's time? How much is each one going to cost? Oh, you can make changes directly from the data management. Okay, but is there a requirement? Can you make the change immediately, or do I have to wait for 3 or 4 months and have accumulation of changes? Ask those questions, be specific, because you ultimately are going to be the one that is going to be working within the system, and you want it to be workable for you. And the only way to do that is to don't be scared to ask those questions. Because if I'm a data management system and I want to sell you my product, I'm going to say, yes, sure. We can always update changes within the system. That's the question you asked me, if we can update changes. You didn't ask me if we could do it immediately. So I'm going to say, yes, sure. We can always update changes. And then we get this data management system. We're like, oh, no, we need this done. And they're like, oh, well, that's going to be 6 months because we can only do so many changes each year. And then you're just stuck. So definitely ask all the questions that you can. I don't care how irrelevant you may think that they are, or how you feel that they may sound to the programmers and the data management people. Ask the questions.
And the other thing that reminded me of is when you're asking those questions, write down the answers and remember those things. Because if in the end they're doing something that they said they would, or they can't do something they said they would do, be like, wait a second, when we had this demonstration, Jesse told me that you all could do this in a time fashion that worked for us. And now it's not. So what's going on? And the other thing too is to find out about how you incorporate your current data into the data system. So at Knightsy, everything was pretty much on paper. There wasn't any data to integrate into the new system. But if you already have a data system and you're looking for something more robust, you don't want to have to re-enter all the data. So how are they going to migrate the former the data you have from the database into the new database? It's generally a process called mapping. But can that be done? And, what does that look like? How long is implementation going to be? You definitely want to get a timeline from them as well when you're doing that.
But one last thing, Kimberly, that I wanted to add, when you're preparing for your vendor demonstrations and we say, have a test case available, if you have to create one or then bring one, I always say, you bring a test case and you bring those people to the table that are like a 6-year-old child in front of your work computer. I mean, they're clicking on everything. They're going into everything and they're scrolling and they're entering different dates and numbers. And try your best to bring those people that are going to jump in and explore the capabilities of that data management system. How many, can I enter 6 different placements? Can I have 7 different declared fathers? And, what happens when I find out that it's a different father and I have to add one more? And can we do all the different placement changes? And, all those things, one of the cases that you're just like, oh, no worker wants that case because it requires so much work. That's the one you want to bring and put it through the system. And don't be scared when you're doing those demonstrations. I mean, just to every situation, every possible scenario that you can think of, work within those demonstrations and within that data management system to see the capability to accommodate all of those.
Wow, fantastic information from both of you. One question I wanted to ask that may have come up, but I just want to make sure we cover it, is talking a little bit about approvals, right? So what approvals might be needed when thinking about a data system? So in recognizing, we talked about in part 1, putting that core team together of having someone from IT, someone from finance, recognizing who those core decision makers are. But speaking a little bit to that, and if there's any sort of people or folks we should really be considering that need to be involved in that approval process.
Well, I think there is the people who need to be involved. So for example, looking at your procurement policy, maybe it needs to go from the team to a director to the executive director to your tribal governance. And then there's people who should be involved in making that decision. So again, looking at your team, definitely your team should have, agreed upon one that they want. But make sure that it includes IT, it includes finance, it includes the directors of every department or division or what have you, that workers are going to be using that system. Is it really going to work for them? Because if it's not, then you're not going to get buy-in from those folks and they're not going to want to spend their money and, et cetera, et cetera. So think about those other individuals. So it may not be that, the director of, or the deputy director of education has any say in it, but you want his or her buy-in to say like, look, this is a really good system. We can use this together. So there's the official, we have to have so many folks, signatures on the dotted line. But definitely the head of those departments, I think is important to have. And the other thing too is if you know that your tribal governing board or committee or what have you is going to be needing to make that decision, invite some of them to maybe like the 2 top vendor demonstrations so they can actually see it for themselves. We talk all the time about our system with our committee, and I don't think they have really an idea of what it does or what it doesn't do for us because they've never seen it. Because it was purchased before all of that happened. So we kind of put the cart before the horse on that one, but don't do that, by the way. But definitely involve them in that.
Really, the only one I wanted to just throw in there, you said invite your tribal government, all of those to those vendor demonstrations, which is wonderful. Also think about your IT people. Even if you are not developing your own data management system, your IT people are going to be really instrumental in being able to come into those vendor demonstrations and know speak the language that's going on, and also that behind the scenes. So when you ask those programmatic, can this data management system meet this programmatic need for us? Behind the scenes, they know that certain things are needed that in the program side we don't know, and that triggers that thought to them. Oh, well, it will do that, but will it also do this, and this? And so having your IT people involved, even if you aren't developing your own system, bringing them to the table at the vendor demonstrations is really imperative.
Awesome. Thank you both. Yeah, I think it's really helpful thinking about who needs to be involved in that, who is approving, who's that person signing off, but who really you need the buy-in from. So great point. All right, folks. Well, that concludes our conversation for today. We have about 3 minutes left, but we're here if there are any questions. I'm going to have a few announcements, and if you want to put some questions in the chat or the Q&A, feel free, or we'll save space at the end as well. But real quick, I did want to let folks know that we have part 3 scheduled for Wednesday, March 13th. So we hope you can join us to talk about contracting with data system vendors and go into an even deeper dive into this conversation with Summer and Kimberly. Our part 1, for those of you who want to review or didn't get a chance to see it, is on the Tribal Information Exchange and our YouTube channel. We have a couple resources that I am going to put right in the chat for folks. One of those resources is the Capacity Building Center for Tribes. We do provide technical assistance to 4B and 4E funded tribes, and can support tribes in identifying and figuring out data systems. And so I encourage, please connect with our staff if that's something that's of interest to you. Our contact information is in all of the registrations, as well as in the slides and on the Tribal Information Exchange. We also have a number of other resources we wanted to share with folks for today. Those are in the chat. They are also in the slides that you have available. So this is our contact information for all of our speakers and everybody who assisted in putting on this webinar today. We'll include all of these email addresses in our wrap-up email that we'll send out to folks with the slides and all of the resources. If there is anything, we're going to be staying on. Otherwise, I just want to thank everybody very much for attending today. It was great to be with you all and share this space, and we hope to see you on March 13th for part 3.